Greetings Internet. Today I thought that given the video I made yesterday, I might talk a little more about diabetes related things. I can never actually remember what year it was when I was first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I remember where I was living at the time, so I should probably go back and be able to work it out at some point, but it's just one of those things that I never quite get around to doing. But I know it was mid to late in my 20s and I'm now in my early 40s, so it's safe to say that, rounding up a little bit, we're probably getting close to 20 years at this point. That diagnosis happened, a fair amount after what is, the average for a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. Is way more common for that to start in childhood, but not so much a statistical anomaly that I would be considered special in any way. It's just less. And I remember back in the early days there was a thing I heard multiple times from multiple people, and that was that the Sheffield NHS Trust was one of the best in the country for diabetes care. And so, that being where I lived, I considered myself fairly lucky in that regard. But that was purely anecdotal. It's not actually something I've ever actually looked up, and I have no idea what metric that would be measured by. But over the years I've always thought, yeah, I'm receiving lots of care. They always call me in for all my checkups and they take all the fluids and measure them and all that kind of thing. If anything sort of looks off, they send you for treatment, they check your eyes, they check your feet. It's always seemed pretty good, but I also have zero experience of what that would be like in any other city. I get monitored both by the hospital system and by my local GP, and there are times when there seems like a bit of a disconnect and not a lot of communication between those two sometimes. Certainly a fair amount of miscommunication and particularly slow communication between those two sometimes, and often a lot of duplicated tests. But I guess in general more tests isn't that much of an issue, although there have been times in the past when the hospital side of the treatment has felt very impersonal. I never felt like you actually got to spend enough time with the doctor there to actually form any kind of relationship, and it just seemed like you were just a number in the system, and they just needed to tick all the boxes to meet their requirement to stay on top of the league tables or something. Even so, with those mentioned downsides, I always felt like they were trying, and there was a lot of stuff going on. But looking back from this point of view, there was one main thing that I heard over and over and over again from multiple healthcare professionals, and that was simply, oh, you've got to get better control of your blood sugar. And I realise now that the problem with that ended up being that was always the end of the appointment. It's like, oh, we've been through all the results, your control's not very good, you really could do with getting better, okay, we'll see you again in 6 months. There was never actually a lot of offer to help with how we were supposed to do that. Now, to be fair, I had been on courses, I'd got all the tools, I supposedly knew everything on how to do that. I just, seemed to constantly sort of fail at how to do that. And I guess I probably wasn't proactive enough advocating on my own behalf, and just kind of took that as a sign that the failing was my fault, which, to be fair, is probably still a large part of it. But then a couple of years ago I ended up with a new specialist diabetes nurse, and suddenly everything kind of changed, and there was a lot more assistance just sort of automatically given about trying to actually help me figure out what bits were missing from the whole picture and how I could, get things better under control. Until that point, I'd basically been on the same dosages and types of insulin for the entire time. I'd had the very same blood test machine the entire time. Now that's all been changed, including, of course, being introduced to the trial for the VEDA'22 sensors. And it probably wouldn't have made all that much difference, but there are times when I find myself wondering, I wonder how things would be different if I had been given or had asked for that help 10 years ago. But I guess better late than never. And I guess the moral of the story is, don't be afraid to ask questions of healthcare providers. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.